Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm glad to be joined today by Sulome Anderson, who's a journalist and author based between New York City and Beirut, Lebanon. If her name rings a bell, it's because she wrote a piece published in Vice. I guess it was close to 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, last week maybe. Who knows where the time has gone. In the piece, among a number of other things that you said, Sulome, you had some sort of implicit and explicit critiques of a critique we did about Reza Aslan. Female genital mutilation in the Muslim world was part of that discussion. I feel like we should just get the low-hanging fruit out of the way first, if that's okay. One of the things you mentioned was that I did not respond to requests for interviews. You've since corrected that and said I stopped responding. I don't know that we need to add too much on that, right? I mean, we did engage in a back and forth.
We definitely did. But first I want to stop you and ask, can you issue a correction? Because my name is actually Sulome, not Sulome.
I'm sorry, Sulome Anderson. My apologies there. Correction stated instantly and immediately. I do have no problem whatsoever with that. So we don't have to do anything else on the stopped responding, right?
No, I mean, you know, your paragraph that I referred to in the piece was, I think, 166 words of an almost 3,000 word essay. So while I, you know, it deserved as much attention and, you know, all parts of a story, it deserved scrutiny. You know, I had a lot of other things going on for that piece. So it was total human error. Okay, good.
And again, before we really get into the meat of it, some of the other things that have sort of come up since, you put out a bunch of tweets where at one point you alleged I was, quote, hiding behind my computer screen and didn't feel like having an adult conversation. I mean, is there anything we need to address on that? Was this just anger? Was it frustration?
I mean, it was both of those things, but not necessarily at you or your video. After your video was posted, hundreds and hundreds of lunatics, you know, mentioning me on Twitter, saying that I was a horrible person and a liar and a horrible journalist. And like, you know, it was my first real experience with the troll army, and it pissed me off. So I apologize for that. And I apologize to you via personal email as well. But, you know, I don't feel proud of it. It was just a lot of I was like completely taken aback by how heated people got, and it was very hurtful.
No doubt about it. Yeah, and obviously, you know, this is common on the internet, and we were on the receiving end of tweets from people defending the article that you wrote, and so on and so forth. Not really germane to our discussion today, which is what I want to get into. Let me open it up to you. What is your critique about the claims we made in our video about Reza Aslan with regard to female genital mutilation? Let's speak as specifically as possible.
Absolutely. So there's a few points. I have notes. I hope that's no problem. Well, you said that I didn't debate the substance of your arguments in the piece. I linked to a couple of things. First is a piece by a prominent FGM campaigner stating specifically that FGM is not an Islamic practice, and it shouldn't be defined as such. So that was one link. And then the other link I provided, I believe, was to the PolitiFact article. I could be wrong about that. But there were a couple of links in there that I thought, you know, if someone had clicked on them, would have addressed some of the points that you bring up. But that being said, so the first thing is FGM predates Islam by centuries. It was a practice that started in, I believe, Northern Africa and spread throughout the continent. So saying that FGM is an Islamic practice, I mean, that in and of itself is misleading because it wasn't created by Islam. I mean, the hadith that you quoted in your critique of Reza Aslan were extremely obscure. Now, the way that Islam works is the Quran is the holy book. So things in the Quran are part of just Islam as a religion. And then you have Sunnah, which are the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. And you have other things, but what you quoted was a very obscure hadith that people don't actually consider to be reliable in any way. I mean,
okay, well, let's put a pause on that if we can. So I understand the point you're making. One thing is, we never described FGM as an Islamic practice. So do you have a citation for where we called it an Islamic practice?
No, that's what the word I was using. I believe you call it an Islamic problem, right?
No, what we said was that there is, aside from the origins and the timeline, if you look at the data, and what I like to do when I critique someone is, does their own data even support the claim they're making? We looked at Reza Aslan's own UNICEF map that he released, pointing to that, trying to separate completely the practice of FGM and Islam. And from his own map, when you look at it, you see that majority Muslim countries have the highest rates of FGM, and that oftentimes it is specifically concentrated within the Muslim area. So just some examples, and then of course I'll give you an opportunity to respond. In Burkina Faso, which is 61% Muslim, there's a 76% FGM rate. In Guinea, which is 85% Muslim, there's a 97% FGM rate. In Mali, which is 90% Muslim, there's an 89% FGM rate. In Sierra Leone, which is 78% Muslim, there's a 90% FGM rate. So how can one argue, aside from whether the origin of FGM is Muslim, is not, we didn't even touch that. The question is, currently, is there a disproportionate problem with FGM in Muslim countries and within Muslim areas? And Reza Aslan's own map, I'm using his map, confirms that.
Yeah, but the thing is with something like that map, or in general, a report of that, density, is that you can take bits and pieces of it and use it things can be the same and then not actually corroborate each other. So for example, that map, I think it's that 29 countries tracked, 14 are home to more Christians than Muslims. So that in and of itself, that was a fact that you did not present in your critique. So I think it's really important to present facts that don't just agree with your argument, but also the other side, in order to provide like a full picture of this problem.
So can you tell me about some specific areas or countries that are non-Muslim, or that are non-majority Muslim, I would say, where the FGM is concentrated among non-Muslims? Are there any counterexamples you can provide?
There are a couple, and I'm trying to remember I want to say Eritrea, but I could be wrong on that. Honestly, I apologize, but I don't have all these things printed out in front of me. I do know that for a fact there are countries on that list that are more Christian than Muslim, that I know. Right,
but the problem is that in Eritrea, the population is 40, you're correct in that it's 48% Muslim and 52% Christian, and it has an 83% FGM rate. That FGM is disproportionately and overwhelmingly in the Muslim areas and among Muslims. So if anything, that example proves what we're saying, not what you're saying.
Okay, well, be that as it may, I tend to disagree given the context of how.
But do you have any data about that?
Okay, yeah, I do. In order to provide the bigger picture along with that fact, is the fact that in the vast majority of the Muslim world, it's not practiced. I work in the Middle East. I have never even encountered it. And
so you're saying when you say you haven't personally encountered female genital mutilation, what do you mean? You've never seen it done?
No, look, I'm a reporter. I work with a lot of, disenfranchised populations, and this is something that I would have heard about. It's something that would be reported, and this is my job, but that doesn't prove my point.
No, it doesn't.
Prove my point? No, it doesn't. It's just an anecdote. What does prove my point is that 80% of Muslims do not practice FGM. It is not, and the verses that you were citing don't prove that Islam actually approves of FGM. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad did not have his daughters mutilated, and there is no verse in the entire Quran that proves in any way that he condoned of genital mutilation for females.
But Sulome, did I say that the Prophet Muhammad had his daughters mutilated?
No, you quoted hadith, which I've already established are not viable in order to prove your point.
So I really want to be as fair to you as possible. I've cited data from Reza Aslan himself in a UNICEF map, as well as data from Amnesty International, which shows that FGM, while predating Islam, currently disproportionately exists in the Muslim areas of non-majority Muslim countries and overwhelmingly exist in majority Muslim countries. You're saying as a journalist, you've never heard about FGM, and that 80%, 4 out of 5 Muslims don't practice it. Is that the defense?
No, there's more defense than that. I mean, again, you have to look at the entire picture. Your argument is that, you said it's an Islamic problem or
No,
a problem with Islam.
I said that this is a problem that disproportionately exists in Islam, but not that it is an Islamic problem per se, or that Islam created FGM. I want to make sure that if we're going to have a back and forth, that we're not starting from something I didn't say.
Okay. Go on. Ask away.
No, I guess I really want to understand what the defense is. I mean, even in saying 80% of Muslims don't practice this, 20% is 320 million people. I don't know that I would say that this is a strong defense to say only 320 million Muslims practice or support FGM. If I were trying to separate this from Islam, I don't know that saying hundreds of millions of people do it is a good defense.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, you have to look at the context, historical and political, of the situation. For example, a practice can start in Africa and be spread throughout parts of the world. That still doesn't make it an Islamic problem or I mean, look, female genital mutilation is a problem regardless, but it's also a problem with Christians. So the point is that you can't paint all Muslims with the same brush because of this practice that actually is not practiced by the majority of Muslims and did not even evolve out of Islam and has no basis of support in Islam.
What Christian areas or Christian groups are known for practicing FGM?
Christian areas and Christian groups. I mean, I've already established that I think 14 of the countries in that graphic are mostly Christian, and there has been recorded many times Christians performing FGM. I mean, it's just that's. But
in what country specifically? Because your one example was Eritrea, where it's just barely a Christian majority, but the FGM itself is almost exclusively by Muslims. So I'm trying to if we can get one example even.
No, I could find all of the 14, which is a number that exists. I don't have the actual names of the countries here because
I have them in front of me. I have them here. I mean, when I look at it, you have Benin and Cameroon and the Central African Republic, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, the Ivory Coast, Kenya, Tanzania, Togo, and Uganda. None of them are Muslim majority, but the FGM is overwhelmingly by Muslims in those countries.
So let me get this straight. Are you saying that Islam has a problem with FGM? Because I would agree that Islam has a problem with FGM, but that it is not an Islamic problem.
Okay,
I mean,
that's fantastic. Hey, we agree, because when we started the interview, you were saying that there is no problem in Islam with FGM, but now you're saying there is. We now agree.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think maybe we were just debating semantics because, yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, it's a problem, but it is not an Islamic problem. And I think that the danger here is when you post videos, just pointing out the Islamic connection to this problem, it just adds, because people don't know the larger context, because you didn't provide facts such as Christian countries also practice it, because you didn't provide, any sort of context to the hadith you quoted, that really packaged it and made it seem like an Islamic problem. And given the general environment that we're in right now, I just don't think that's a helpful thing to do.
I don't think it's helpful to say because of the environment we can't cite accurate statistics, which still in your article and today you haven't refuted. I mean, after I told you the statistics, you're now saying you agree there is a problem in Islam with FGM.
Oh, absolutely. I've said this many times. There is a problem, but the way you put it on your show obviously made it seem like it was an Islamic problem. I mean, I watched the whole thing like 30 times. I know that the way it was put was that it was an intrinsically Islamic problem.
No, I think we were abundantly clear that we're not saying it's intrinsically an Islamic problem. We never said that Islam created FGM. We never said that that FGM exists only in Islam. I think the critique you are now issuing, which is a different one than at the beginning, which is that there is no problem with FGM in Islam. The critique you're now issuing is one based on something we never said.
No, it's based on what you didn't say. I mean, in order to present, again, the whole picture, you should provide points that agree with what you're saying and points that don't, and that provide context to the situation. And I just don't feel like you did that.
Well,
Sorry.
I think that that onus should have been on Reza Aslan. Our video was a critique of what he said. So if the critique you're issuing is that we were not giving both sides, we were critiquing what Reza Aslan said, which definitely didn't give both sides. So I'm wondering where you were when he initially made the claims that there's no connection or anything to discuss between Islam and FGM. Why didn't you tell him he wasn't giving both sides, as opposed to us in our critique of him? It doesn't sound like you're applying the same standard to what he said.
No, I've watched what Reza said multiple times, and I don't believe that he ever said that there was no problem with FGM in Islam at all. I mean, that would just be, not true. But I don't remember him saying that even once. But in any case, I also wanted to address something you said in your video about me.
Sure.
You said that you just provided clips of, your coverage of Reza was, I think like 1/9 of an episode. So the first video that I came across while I was doing my research, I believe it was over 25 minutes long.
Yeah.
And I think 9 or 10 minutes of that was spent just critiquing his credentials. So unless your show is like 200 and something minutes long, it's hardly 1/9.
Yeah, no, so the first clip we did of Reza Aslan was discussing the interview he did with Lauren Green on Fox News. It was essentially exclusively positive and effusive about Reza Aslan, defending him and criticizing Lauren Green. And I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it was somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes long.
Okay, right. But if you Google, David Pakman, Reza Aslan, I'm just going to read off a couple of the things that come up. Reza Aslan cannot be trusted. That's 2546. Reza Aslan's lies and media bias, which I guess is an interview you did with the Rubin Report. Response to David Pakman, read Reza Aslan's qualifications. Reza Aslan's religious apologetics are dangerous. And then our piece, audience agrees, Reza Aslan increasingly questionable. Ex-Muslim drops hammer on Reza Aslan, conservatives, liberals. I think also that's more than 4.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, we're now, you said before it was a semantic argument. I don't think before there was anything semantical about the argument. Now I think it is. I mean, one of those that you read is an interview I did elsewhere where someone else chose to title it that way. It's not even part of my show. It was someone else's show. What point do you want to make here, Sulome? There were 5 clips instead of 4. Is that the point?
No, I mean, it's just that already we've established that one of them was almost 26 minutes long. So that's that. You picked apart my article, the paragraph of a 3,000-word article that I thought contained some very important things.
Yeah.
You picked apart line by line. So I'm just doing the same for you. You also said that I didn't respond, that my requests for comment were just one request. That's not true. In our exchange, I followed up twice to the last answer you gave me. And what you said, I said in your video was that, I hope you'll participate. That's not what I said. My response to your response to me was, I totally understand your hesitation and will simply say that's never been my style. Later on that day when you didn't respond, I said, if you want to view some more of my work to get a sense of what I do, you can find it here, a link to my stories page. Hope to hear from you soon. So that's 2 follow-ups. I believe that
so
counts. So
if I understand what you're saying, Sulome, it's that you're considering the back and forth we had that day as multiple requests, whereas I described it as all part of one request. Is that the clarification you're making? That since there was a back and forth, you're considering each response of yours an individual request, thus the plural requests is accurate?
Yeah, because I think when I asked multiple times, hope to hear from you soon, I really want to speak with you. I mean, those are all requests, and you chose not to participate, which is your right. I'm not blaming you for that.
Thank you.
However, no, I mean, it's true. But I was only provided, in that context, I was only provided with one side of the story. And I really actually wanted to talk about this with you because I've watched your show, and I realized that you are probably going to be a good person to talk to about this. You're not an idiot. Like, I can have a conversation with you. Yeah. So I was looking forward to it. And as a journalist, this was also a personal essay, and I made that very clear in the email that I sent you initially. I never lied about its content. I never lied about its perspective. So this is a personal essay already. It's not
Fair
an
enough.
objective
All
piece.
right. Well, so, to the extent that there were multiple emails you sent me, I'm willing to grant that those were requests in the interest of sort of being open and willing to sort of revise what I said. So let's consider that you made multiple requests. Fair enough. I hope that one way or another, we're super out of time, but I'll give you, just a last chance to get the last word here. I hope people will watch this. They're free to research the data I provided, and they're free to, see what perspective they come away with. Maybe you've convinced someone here, at least with regards to FGM. I'll give you the last word.
Okay. Yeah, so the only thing I would say is the way that your video presented it was, the one error that I really do consider to be an error was saying that you didn't respond instead of stopped responding, which I've already explained. We issued a correction immediately. But for you to post that on your video the way you did made me look like a liar. And that's what I've been called for I don't know how many days now straight, every time I look at my notification feed. There may have been a few people who defended me online, but they're nowhere near as many has been harassing me online.
Okay, but you're not, just to be clear, you're not blaming me for people online harassing you, right? I mean, it's like if I do shows all the time, people harass me online all the time. I don't blame the person who talked about me. It's like daily.
Well, 100%, but I mean, you were worried about me taking your quotes out of context, and I think that's what you did with me.
Fair enough. All right. Well, the audience can decide. I stand by what we said. I think any confusion is semantic at most, but the audience will judge. And what I can say with certitude is I do appreciate you coming in today and having the conversation with me. I think that if more people did that, we'd be much better off.
I agree. Thank you for having me.
Sulome Anderson, journalist, author, sometimes in New York City, sometimes in Beirut. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.